Today, we're going to talk about something that's really starting to shake up education: interdisciplinary learning. It's all about knocking down the walls between subjects to get students ready for the real world, which, let's be honest, is messy, connected, and definitely does not fit into neat little class periods. So let's dive in. This quote from Edutopia just nails it, doesn't it? I mean, think about your own life. When you're trying to solve a problem at work, or figure out your budget, or even just plan a vacation, you're not just using one skill. You're pulling from math, communication, planning, critical thinking, all at once. Life really is the ultimate group project. And that kind of leads us to the big question here. If the world we live in demands that we connect the dots, why do so many of our schools insist on keeping them separate? You get an hour of math, then the bell rings, an hour of history, bell rings, an hour of science. It's a structure that just doesn't line up with reality. So to really get what the solution looks like, we need to be crystal clear on what we're talking about. What does this word interdisciplinary actually mean? Let's break it down and get beyond those old school subject silos. Okay, here's the official definition, but the word I really want you to focus on is integration. This is so much more than just, studying two subjects at the same time. It's about actively blending them, using the tools from one area to unlock new ideas in another. It creates a much richer, way more complete picture. Now, this slide has what is probably my favorite way of explaining this whole thing: the dinner metaphor. It makes it so clear. Okay, so multidisciplinary is like a dinner plate, right? You've got your potatoes, your meat, your veggies. They're all in the same plate, but they don't touch. Interdisciplinary, and this is our focus today, is like a curry. The different ingredients have all mixed together to create a brand new, totally distinct flavor. And then you have transdisciplinarity, which goes even further, like baking a cake. It's an entirely new thing that goes beyond the original ingredients. All right, so we've got the theory down. That's all well and good, but what does this actually look like in a real classroom? How do you take this big idea and turn it into something real and meaningful for students? Let's check out a couple of examples. So here's an awesome real-world example. Instead of a boring chapter on algebra, students get a big, driving question like this one. You just can't answer this question with only one subject. No way. It absolutely demands that you look at it from all different angles. And this is where the magic really happens. See how it all works together? Algebra is no longer just a bunch of numbers on a page. It becomes the vital tool you need to analyze the economics of it all. Social studies gives you the human context. I mean, what does dignified even mean? Science looks at the real-world health effects, and then language arts comes in with powerful stories to build empathy. Everything is woven together to tackle one big problem. Let's look at one more, just to see how flexible this approach can be. Here's a challenge that is super local, but also has huge global importance: getting access to clean water. And once again, you see this beautiful synthesis of subjects. Science class becomes a hands-on lab where you're testing water quality. In math class, students are creating the actual graphs and models that show just how big the problem is. Social studies gives you the history and geography, while English connects you to the deep human story behind all the numbers. It's powerful stuff. Okay, this all sounds amazing, right? Which, of course, raises the obvious question: if it's so good, why isn't every single school doing it? Well, the truth is, making this happen comes with some pretty significant challenges. So what's really the holdup? What's preventing this model from just being the way we do things? Let's get into the nitty-gritty of the roadblocks. Well, research points to a few major things. First off, the very structure of our schools, with different departments that basically operate like their own little islands. Then there's just a natural resistance to such a huge change. And of course, you've got the big practical problems. This kind of teaching takes way more planning time, more resources, and special training, all things that are usually in pretty short supply. But hey, it's not impossible. The same research shows us exactly what's needed for this to work. It really comes down to intentionally creating the right environment. Things like giving teachers specific, dedicated time to plan together, allowing for more flexible curriculums, providing ongoing training, and, this one's a biggie, coming up with new ways to actually grade these integrated skills. And that last point about assessment is so important, it really deserves its own section. This is often the hardest piece of the puzzle. I mean, how do you fairly and accurately slap a grade on work that is so complex and has so many moving parts? It's the million-dollar question for sure, for teachers, for parents, for students. When a project mixes science, history, and art all together, what does an A even look like? Your standard multiple choice test just isn't going to cut it. Thankfully, people like researcher Clinton Golding have given us some really clear guidelines. You can assess high-quality work based on three main things. First, disciplinary grounding. Did the student actually use the tools and knowledge from each subject correctly? Second, integration. Did they really blend the ideas together, or did they just kind of list them side by side? And third, critical awareness. Did they understand why they chose those subjects, and could they talk about the limits of their own approach? And to make that whole process a lot more concrete, here's a wonderfully simple and effective little tool. Just ask students to complete a sentence like this. It forces them to make their thinking visible. They actually have to explain their choices, which is a key skill in itself and frankly makes it a whole lot easier to grade. Okay, we have looked at the what, the how, the challenges, and even how to grade it. Let's pull the camera all the way back and ask the most important question. Why should we care? Why does any of this actually matter for a student's future? Well, the payoff is absolutely enormous, because this approach is a direct workout for the skills that matter most in the 21st century. When students work on a project like that dignified wage one, they aren't just doing algebra. They're practicing complex problem solving. When they figure out how to blend history and science, that's critical thinking and creativity in action. These aren't just buzzwords on a resume. They're real, tangible skills you get from learning without walls. At the end of the day, the whole point of education is to get students ready for the world they're going to step into. And that world, with huge challenges like climate change, global health crises, and AI, it just doesn't come in tidy little subject boxes. And so, that leaves us with one final big thought. If we're truly serious about preparing the next generation to solve the biggest, messiest problems humanity has ever seen, well, doesn't it make sense that we have to start by fundamentally changing how we learn about those problems in the first place? Something to think about. Thanks for tuning in.